The cabin sat alone at the edge of a silent lake, buried deep within a forest where even the birds seemed hesitant to sing. It hadn't been touched in over 3 decades, left to rot among the trees and thick undergrowth. When she arrived, the summer sun was setting behind the trees, casting long shadows across the cracked path that led to the porch. The silence felt heavy, as though nature itself was holding its breath. The isolation was complete. No phone signal, no power lines, not even a mailbox. The nearest town was miles away, and the dirt road that had brought her here had vanished into the woods behind her, swallowed up by thickets and vines dot as she stepped onto the porch. The old wooden boards groaned under her weight. The door stood slightly ajar, as if waiting for her. Inside, the air was musty and cold, despite the summer heat, and dust covered everything like a thick blanket. Old furniture sagged with time, and faded photographs hung crooked on the walls. In each one, family members posed stiffly, their expressions unreadable, but their eyes looked unusually sharp, untouched by the fading. She felt those eyes on her, somehow alive, locked in place but full of presence. The windows were covered with thick curtains blocking out most of the light, and cobwebs clung to every corner like the fingers of something ancient that never left. The stillness inside the cabin felt unnatural. No creaking pipes, no ticking clocks, not even the sound of wind outside. It was the kind of silence that made your ears ring. She had come here expecting peace, an escape from the noise of her daily life, but what greeted her instead was an atmosphere so heavy and charged. It felt like stepping into a room that remembered everything that ever happened inside it. The first night was eerily quiet, but not in a peaceful way. It was the kind of silence that made every little sound stand out: the creak of the floorboards, the groan of the trees outside, the faint ticking of her own heartbeat in her ears. She lay in bed, staring at the wooden ceiling, eyes tracing the uneven lines and cracks in the timber. Just when she started drifting towards sleep, she heard it. A whisper, so soft it could have been mistaken for the wind, except the windows were shut tight and there was no breeze. It came from the hallway, low and garbled, like someone mumbling through gritted teeth. She sat up, held her breath, listened. Nothing. Only silence again. The second time, it came from just behind her, just beyond the wall, near the kitchen. She moved carefully, trying not to make the floorboards squeal beneath her bare feet. She reached the hallway and peered into the dark, her breath shallow, chest tight. Nothing was there, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something had just moved out of sight, slipping into a shadow too quickly to catch. She stayed awake until morning, heart pounding, ears on high alert. The second night, things escalated. From the window, she saw shadows between the trees. Not swaying, not flickering, just still, standing, watching. Every time she looked, they were gone. But every time she looked away, they returned. She closed the curtains tightly, but that didn't help. The whispers came back, louder this time, echoing from different parts of the cabin. They stopped the moment she moved. It was like the walls themselves had breath, like the space was alive and aware of her every movement. The air began to feel heavy, charged, as though the house was holding something back on the third morning. She walked down to the lake, hoping the cool air and water would help clear her head. The surface was glass smooth, reflecting the gray. Sky and pine trees like a still photograph. But when she stepped closer to the shore, her foot sank into something soft. She looked down and froze. There, in the muddy edge of the bank, were footprints, bare, human, and fresh. They were deep and oddly spaced, as if whoever left them had been standing still for a long time, facing the cabin. The strange part was, they didn't lead away. They only led to the house. Her stomach dropped. She hadn't been to the lake since arriving. No one else was supposed to be here. She crouched, inspecting the prints, her hand hovering just above. Them, they weren't hers. They were too long, too wide. Something about the shape felt wrong, like the toes were longer than they should be. She followed the trail a few steps until it ended abruptly, as if the person had vanished right there at the edge of the trees. That day, she felt eyes on her constantly. Whether inside the cabin or walking through the woods, the sensation never left. It wasn't just paranoia, it was pointed, sharp, focused, as if something had taken an interest in her. The mirrors inside the cabin began to play tricks on her. Sometimes she would catch glimpses of movement behind her, only to turn and find nothing. Other times, her own reflection wouldn't quite match, just a fraction of a second behind, or slightly out of sync. She stopped opening the curtains. It felt safer not to see, but the feeling of being watched only grew stronger, more intense, as if the walls were thinning and whatever was outside was pressing closer with each passing hour. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay motionless in bed, arms tucked tightly against her sides beneath the thin blanket, trying not to breathe too loudly. The room was dark, lit only by a faint sliver of moonlight sneaking through a crack in the curtain. Every sound in the cabin had changed. The silence was no longer flat, it pulsed. The floor groaned even when she didn't move, like weight was shifting across it. At exactly 3:14 a.m., the sound began. First, the screen door downstairs creaked open, slowly, a long, dragging squeal that echoed through the walls like a warning. She sat up in bed, eyes wide, heart hammering against her chest. She didn't dare speak, didn't dare move. Then came the knock. One slow knock. On the window beside her bed, she held her breath so hard it hurt. The knock came again, slower this time. Deliberate, like someone waiting for her to respond. The curtain fluttered slightly, and her hand clutched the blanket as her eyes stayed fixed on the glass. No shadow, no face. Just the sound, and then something else. A dragging sound, low and rough, like nails or claws scraping against the outer wooden walls. It started near the window, then circled around the house. She followed the sound with her eyes, tracking it silently in her mind as it moved past the living room, the kitchen, the front door, and back again to her window. The scraping stopped suddenly, leaving the cabin in dead silence. She stared at the window, frozen in place. Every second stretched like hours. Then something pressed against the window pane, not hard, just enough to make it creak. A slow, deliberate pressure, like someone or something leaning in, testing the glass, seeing how thin the boundary really was between them and early morning. The sun had risen, but its warmth didn't reach inside the cabin. It was colder than it should have been. The light outside looked washed out, like a filter had been placed over the world. She forced herself out of bed, every muscle tense, and walked slowly toward the window. Her heart sank. There, clear as day, were claw marks streaked across the glass, long, jagged, and deep. The kind of damage that didn't come from branches or weather. She stepped back instinctively, bumping into the chair behind her. That's when she noticed the muddy footprint on the wooden floor. Inside the room, it was positioned right in the center of the floor, as if whoever or whatever had left it wanted it to be found. It was the same as the ones by the lake. Large, bare, wrong. The cabin door had been locked. She had checked it twice before going to bed. Every window had been closed. There was no broken glass, no signs of forced entry. And yet, something had clearly been inside. She didn't scream. Couldn't. The fear had gone beyond panic into something else, something colder, more detached. She backed into the hallway, every step slow and cautious. As she passed by the mirror, she noticed something again, her reflection. It wasn't right. This time, the version of her in the mirror wasn't following her movements exactly. It stood still for just a moment longer than she did, eyes fixed forward while she turned to look behind. She forced herself to keep moving, trying to ignore the rising nausea in her stomach. Every room felt altered somehow, like the walls had shifted slightly during the night. The air was heavier, the silence was deeper. Something had changed permanently, and there was no denying it anymore.